basically village agents are there to work within communities, working with individuals. Well, I have a similar role, but my role is to work specifically with businesses who've been affected by the flooding. One of the things that my role is to help you to make your business more resilient to flooding, and that is both in terms of obviously the physical measures, so putting you in touch with people like the University of Exeter and specialists that can actually help you look at what actual practical measures are going to help, but also on the sort of business resilience side of things, so looking at perhaps looking at other markets that you can target.
So this research, as I said, is focused in Gloucestershire, and it's looking at sort of community resilience and people's memories of flooding and how learning gets passed down through the generations about flood risk.
We looked after our own anyway, we all keep an eye on each other. It's like a little village on its own.
Well, at post-flooding, we found lots of people did get involved in community action groups, and things like in Tewkesbury, businesses have collaborated to get the message open that Tewkesbury is open for business, because they're smaller businesses and they can make fast decisions and they can quickly draw on people around them. They're often a lot more resilient than they might be perceived as.
One of the key sort of focus areas for us is getting businesses to assess their own sort of risk and vulnerabilities. Particularly, there's a tool we promote called the Business Resilience Health Check tool, and this goes through all the different aspects of the business. It provides a sort of bespoke report. I think our key message would be learning from their peers. It's something we hear sort of continually from our partners and attending events.
What we were able to do is, for an area, show how the flood risk would develop. This is what the point of the models is. You can see over time, where the flow goes. So this might be useful, this kind of expertise in understanding, areas that are at risk of flooding. We're doing research here into what the impacts are, so how does that actually affect people. And our background is engineering, so we're thinking more about how does it affect the infrastructure, what's the damage. I mean, this is to try and look at different types of aspects, impacts such as damage to buildings, infrastructure, maybe traffic disruption, and therefore, if you know there's impacts, you can think about how you might deal with that.
Where I live in a village, they're now going to build 150 development houses, and they're saying, well, we can work this round.
The main things you need to think about, I think, are in a business, protecting your staff really would be the main thing for me, because life always should come first, obviously, and then think about if you've got any hazards that could be in the way, all those things. But going through a template will help you pinpoint those things. There's one organisation that you may have already heard of, but I think are really useful, and they're useful to businesses as well as individuals, and that's the National Flood Forum. I don't know if you've heard them, they're a charity. But you can just call them, and they've got something called the Blue Pages.
If they had some tool where it was quite easy for them to put a map on their website saying, if you follow this route, you'll get there.
It isn't possible to say that an event is definitely to do with climate change, but there is an emerging science of what's called detection and attribution. So we're now getting to a stage where we can describe how climate change is influencing the chances of having these kinds of flood events. That official statutory government report was very clear that flooding was the biggest threat in the UK related to climate change. It was the top risk. In fact, flooding issues were several of the top risks in the top 10. Clearly at the Met Office we're working mostly on the source of flooding, so we're looking at sea levels, estimating river flows, and looking at wave forecasting and so on. Then it's a lot about what we call the pathway, so it's how water gets to your property, so flood defences, what happens in the catchment, how you manage the catchment upstream of where you live, and a lot about receptors, the things that are affected and damaged.
And the flood risk issues, and they can build concerns that seem to be ignored.
When people see graphic images, whether it's things of flooding, whether it's foot and mouth, that keeps the perception really, really high up in their mind, but they don't actually know whereabouts it was. So the perception that the whole of Somerset was flooded, when the reality that we all know is only 2% of the landmass was flooded. But we have had lots and lots of publicity, and if we had to pay for that sort of publicity, as someone said, we would have spent an absolute fortune just by having that human contact, that face-to-face contact with your customers. That's kind of what people want. They want that reassurance. A communication plan doesn't have to be a really weighty document that sits on a shelf and gathers dust. A communication plan needs to set out very clearly, if this happens, this is what we're going to do. We know things have been very bleak. We know that it's been very, very difficult and challenging for people. But when you're speaking to your customers, you have to use positive language with people. As I say, factually correct. It might be that you're shut, but you're going to be open next week. And you're going to be open with a new display of stock. You're going to have a refurbished shop. Whatever it is, positive messages need to go out there.